I should say. Hi, everybody. Welcome and thanks for joining us with a little bit of a technical glitch. But if you are hearing me, can you please put something in the chat box that we can see that confirmation? I can see that there are 15 attendees in the live, so it's a good sign. All right, I'll start with the Pms Meetup presentation. Let's move. Yeah. Can you see my desktop now? Ralph, can you see that?
Yeah, I can see it.
Great. So Pms Sydney Meetup is here because of its sponsors. And then we are moving forward to, before we start, please, if you're on the go, please stop somewhere safe to watch the webinar. The participants are viewer-only audiences, so you can chat with us through the chat panel. And then the current session is live, and then you can watch it, and then it will be published in the PMO Solutions YouTube. Today we have Ralph. I'm sure that you guys know him very well. Agile coach, Scale Agile, Scrum Master, digital transformation leader, amazing guy, our February, March Mr. Over 15 years within digital transformation and Agile method. Is connecting to us from Canberra, and also now good news is Ralph is writing the global standard for leading successful digital transformation, PMO Flashmob co-founder, and also he is a PMO Manifesto author, the PTO reviewer, PMI portfolio book author, and a lot of things, and an inventor of the digital PMI. Ralph today is going to talk to us about the digital transformation framework, which is actually connecting us to our discussions last year about digital transformation, and a lot of great works that he has done. He's going to share all the experiences. As you know, we are all from PMO Solutions. We work with the PMO Global Alliance in Australia. I would like to use this channel now and invite you to check the PMO Global Award has been started, and it can be nominated in the award ceremony and like moving forward. It's a very good event. You will learn a lot. You will get access to lots of case studies, and also you will get lots of consulting views from PMO professionals around the world. So if you are working or managing a good PMO office and would like to share your experience with the global people, it's a very good opportunity to start the PMO Global Award. What we do, we have lots of training sessions. One of the training sessions that we are planning to launch, and I think I would like to invite you guys for trying that training session, is a financial for non-financial PMOs, and also strategy management ups and downs. Also, we provide PMO practitioner certification. So for more information, please have a look at pmosol.com. A great sponsor of PMO Sydney Meetup is the Project Management Institute Sydney. Hamam, if you are within those attendees, I know I have to send you something, but yeah, it is in my queue. As I said, apologies because my baby was sick and I really didn't have a real life. So I'm trying to get back to the normal life soon. All right. So about PMO Sydney Meetup, guys, you are part of it. We have a LinkedIn page as a PMO Sydney Meetup, and also we have, and we have a meetup in a meetup platform with 1,931 members. So I think that's going to be a good reason to celebrate when we get to 2K members. The purpose of this meetup is sharing knowledge of skilled PMO professionals, learning from each other, networking, and keep each other motivated, which actually is one of the very good opportunities for everybody to learn from each other. And so far, we had organized more than 100 events. We had more than 50 speakers, and also we introduced more than 20 books, which I'm hoping that all of these are helping to uplifting the PMO capabilities. Okay, so a little bit of review of those days that we could get together. Oh, sorry. Alrighty, so tell me who has missed these gatherings. I think I missed it a lot, and I think it would be good to revisit our arrangement again. So, so that's why I would like to ask you to go to this address and help me. What is happening here? So let me know if you guys are interested. I don't know what happened. Let me see. That should be. If you go to this address, the pauliv.com/PM also, and let me know that how would you like to have the events? Would you like to still continuing with the online event, real life event, or face-to-face? So it would be great if you can just going there and let me know. Know what is happening in that. But yeah, so I will appreciate your thing. I don't know why. Let me go here. It's the one. So if you, yeah, if you can please. Yep, no, it is working. So if you go to this page and then let me know what you think of, it's gonna help me in terms of designing and putting together, because if we want to go with the face-to-face, we have to find some places as well. So I don't know if that works. Ooh, thank you. Nice. Any other rope? So what do you think, guys? So it seems that we have two line. Nobody's going with the real life events or face to face. Yeah, and our sponsors actually are the doors are open and they are inviting us for being involved in just like having a face-to-face session. So think about it and let me know. I would like to move forward and invite Ralph on the stage. So I'm gonna put you. Oh, nice. So we have 3 votes, face-to-face. Online, just please on the head. Yeah. What else? Oh, come on, guys. We have 20 people attendees, so you can let me know. Nice, thank you. I'm happy no one is saying no more sessions. Nice. Raf, you're mute.
You hear me?
Oh, yeah, good.
You hear me?
Oh, yeah. People like the online sessions. Look at the impact of the COVID, isn't it?
It's the new world.
It's a new word, isn't it? Ooh. Nice. So it seems that the online event dynamics of both are good. The good thing about the online events is we can invite external and people from outside of Australia. And that's a good opportunity for us. Like, for example, for Ralph, we saved a lot of time for him instead of traveling from Canberra to here. But yeah, thank you. So let's move. Thanks a lot. I will consider that for sure. And I now would like to invite Ralph to the stage.
Thanks, Amira. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Apologies there. I can't see everybody at the moment, so it's almost like I'm just speaking to a screen. And if you just give me a moment, I'm just going to share my screen a second. And here we go. Okay, Amira, I'm trusting you can see the screen okay. If you can just confirm you can.
I can't now. Now I can.
Perfect. Okay, right. So here we go. All right. So thanks everybody for sparing some of your time, and hopefully I've got about 30-40 minutes, so I'm going to run through this pretty quick. This is a topic I've been working on for some years now, and it's evolved. So I know each year I seem to come up and have a chat with you guys around that January-February period. And in the background, there's been a lot of work going on behind the scenes with this piece of work. But like with all good products, it's evolved over time, and it's probably about now's the time where I can start to share some of this stuff with you. To be fair, when I will start to discuss more of a digital transformation framework, it's the sort of topic and the sort of thing that even over 2 days of full training or 2 days of coaching on this stuff, it's difficult to break the back of it. If anything, that's why it's going into a book. It's probably going to end up being at least a week's worth or at least 4 days of type of information that people would need to get their head across. So for this session, I'm going to really race through and just give a brief overview. But to give a brief overview, I've also got to give a bit of a background of where I'm coming at with some of this stuff as well. And what I'm hoping a few of you will walk away from this session with is where you'll look back and go, when you understand the word agile or Scrum or digital, you'll go, oh, I never thought of it that way before. So
And Raf, sorry, the presentation is in the in your background. The presentation, it's not the main page. Yeah.
On the wrong screen. Hold on a second here. Sorry about that. Let me just give me 1 second.
Yeah, just bring it together.
Sorry about that. Just give me a second. And if I go back to open share tray, this is going to be fun again, because everything is working in real time. What they say, don't work with children, animals, or technology.
Yeah, children, I'm very, very agree. You cannot manage anything. Okay, you sharing?
Clicking on share now, just waiting for. So if I go to my share tray, you got me as presenter, yeah? How's that?
Hasn't come across yet.
Is that working a bit better? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one.
Perfect. Okay, so going back to the topic here, to try and get through it in 30 minutes is a bit of a tall ask. So, but what I'm hoping you'll come away with is a bit of an insight of what Agile is, what Scrum is, what digital is, and then why you need a digital transformation framework, how it all wraps together. It's probably worth noting as well with this type of stuff, I've been researching this type of thing for many years now, and I was first introduced to Agile back in 2003 at Royal Bank of Scotland when I worked there, and started using it in 2005, and I've used it constantly, you know, during that period, probably for the last 15 years or so. And what I got into is, after being involved in such a long period of time, I'd had so many different coaches, so many different people who had different views of the world. I started going right back to the root of this and researching the 17 authors of the Agile Manifesto, and also the guys who first created the first Scrum guide. And what I found was extremely insightful. It was almost where some of the coaches I'd had come out of a training course, and the way they understood it was completely different than what was intended of those 17 signatures. And I urge you all at some point to just look at those 16 signatures of the Agile Manifesto, go onto YouTube and watch interviews with some of those guys. It's pretty insightful, where you've even the 17 guys sometimes disagree for various different reasons. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to race through some of this for you now. So been here before, you've seen this slide before, been involved in all the different types of digital and agile type stuff for many years now. But for today, what I want to get through is what is agile in my mind, and from the research I've done on agile. When do you not use agile? That's a bit of a loaded question, and unfortunately there's not a simple answer with that, but I can start to share you some of my thoughts on this one as well, because it's not something you can apply to everything. Why scaling agile is very difficult. So most of you have probably heard of scaled agile now, or the scaled agile framework, SAFe. And it's fair to say, if you research the background and the origins of scaled agile, you start to realize that it was intended for something different than what some organizations are trying to use it for today. But like with all good marketing and training courses, they'll try and make it fit everywhere they can to try and get as much of it out there as they can. But again, that goes back to what they don't tell you is when to or when not to use agile. So this is something that's key to a digital transformation framework. So I'll then just touch on what a digital transformation framework is, why creating a DTF is different than other lifecycle approaches that you might have had. And then hopefully, if we've got enough time, we can go on to how you can create your own ecosystem, what will support agile delivery approaches. So before I do, just a brief history. And like I said, I've been doing a lot of research in this area, and I was quite awed, shall I say, when I found out how far back some of this stuff goes. So what we have is the origins of a lean process, or lean manufacturing. Started with the Toyota process, where it was originally tested in some supermarkets before Toyota. And then it was Toyota who took it on board. But the book, and that was in about the 50s and 60s, but the book wasn't actually written until 1978. And the reason why it's important to just log on to that milestone there of 1978 of the first lean book is because it really wasn't applied to software or to IT type projects or thought of in that way until around 2004, when Anderson came up with the first lean book on technology. And that's when lean was first seen in a technology capacity, around that 2004. But you know, around that period, going after the 70s, we had project management started to be played with about. I mean, I think it was like the US Defense came up with earned value management around the 1960s. And it was 1991 when RAD was first created, Rapid Application Development, which was an iterative way of delivering applications, which was the old word for software. Then you had Dynamic Systems, which is DSDM, and that was around 1994. And that, if anybody's heard of prioritizing stuff with Moscow, that's the must, should, could, would type approach. That's where that came from. And that again was an iterative approach. And then you had Scrum, that was written up the first time in 1994, but published in 1995. And it was only in 1996 that you got Prince 2. And the interesting thing, when you look at PMI and you look at the PMI bot was around that period as well. So some of this iterative way of delivery was being looked at and tried out from the early 90s into the mid 90s. And then we get up to 2001, where we get the first version of the Agile Manifesto. And this is why it's quite interesting, because I often thought the Agile Manifesto came first and then they created Scrum. And it's far from that. If you watch the interviews of these guys on YouTube, and they're at different conferences and they're all talking about how it all came to light, how the Agile Manifesto was written, they were all agreed on one thing, and they were frustrated that they were being given a prescriptive way of delivering software. And at the core of the Agile Manifesto, it was about being adaptable to different ways of delivering software. That meant that you would deliver software in the best way possible, and you would change to that best way possible to make sure you're delivering the best value for the customer. So when went back and read the Agile Manifesto and went back and read the Scrum Guide, knowing that, I thought, hold on a second here. I had one of those eureka moments where I thought, I'm getting it now. It's not prescriptive. Agile, is being adaptive. And when you go back to then the values and the principles, what they're basically saying is the values are like a mindset, so to say, and the principles are like a set of behaviors. So the Agile Manifesto was about the mindset and behaviors, the values and the principles, about how we think about ourselves and as teams to deliver the best value for the customer. And we do that by delivering it in the best way possible. So I suggest you go back after this and read through the Agile Manifesto afterwards and look at it. And the reason why that's important is because Agile is an adjective, but what we're starting to do now is turn it into a noun. We're starting to turn it into a product, a thing that you can touch, feel, and see. It's not that. In fact, if you go back to the Agile Manifesto website, it says it is the manifesto for Agile software development. It's talking about as an adjective, as something we do. Certainly not as a noun, as a product, yet what we've done is we've turned it into a product. So then if you look at this lifespan, so project management was formalized, with PMI, Prince2, and some others around the same time as the iterative processes that were coming through from the technology world with rapid application development, dynamic systems, Scrum. And it was the Agile Manifesto was about pulling all that together and going, do you know what, this is about actually we pull the right delivery process together as best we can to deliver the best value for the customer. So that's some of the history and the timeline of where we get to. So for the sake of this presentation, I've already covered my views of the world, what Agile is. Agile isn't stand-ups, sprints, scrums, sprint reviews. It's none of that. It's certainly not scaled Agile and flow in my world. Agile in my world is that mindset and behaviors, and those things I often find are very hard to coach and to change. It's easy to get someone to follow a process, but it's a lot more difficult to get someone to change their behavior. And I think what you've got to think about there is when people go on a Scrum Masters course for a day or 2 days and they come away, you'll see it at the end of this presentation when I wrap up, I talk about Scrum. And if you look at the Scrum Guide says Scrum is a process framework for iterative delivery. It is not necessarily Agile. Agile is the mindset and behaviors. The two complement each other, but a lot of people naturally think if I'm doing Scrum, I'm doing Agile, and that's not always the case, because you can follow that process but still not have that behaviors that support it. So for the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to break a rule. When I refer to Agile, I'm going to refer to it as a noun, as a thing, noting that most of the world out there, probably including a lot of your colleagues and peers, will think Agile is Scrum. If I'm doing stand-ups, if I'm doing sprints, then I'm doing Agile. So for this presentation, when I say the word Agile, I'm meaning holistically. It's a word that's used throughout our industry to cover off all that stuff. But as long as you know, deep in my mind and in my heart, Agile is not that. It's the values and principles. It's the mindset and behaviors. And Scrum to me is a process framework. Okay, so I'm going to move on now. So why can every project be delivered with Agile? Well, this is the interesting predicament. So I call this Agile versus Waterfall, but really what it is you're looking at here is there's only two ways you can deliver a project. And if people say you don't do projects with Agile, I can let you know now, the Agile Manifesto uses the word project twice in it, and it refers to plans, which are a core part of projects. So when they were talking about the Agile Manifesto, and if you look at people like Dave Thomas, one of the 17 authors, he'll say, yes, we were talking about delivering projects. Yeah, so the Agile Manifesto was all about projects. So you can only deliver in two ways, and that is, you know, you as project management professionals, you're aware of what some people term the iron triangle. This was created as part of earned value management with the defense industry in the 1960s. And it was an engineering practice. It was saying, how do I make sure I don't over-engineer something and therefore don't charge the customer or you know, overpay for my product or take too much time building it. So what I want to do is I want to be able to understand what the quality is. So to get the quality, I define the scope. When I define the scope, I can then understand the time, the cost that's needed, and the time I've got to deliver it. So that's where it came from. So when we talk about waterfall, that is what we mean by waterfall. And interestingly enough, the definition waterfall was never used in any PMI book, body of knowledge, in the earlier versions, and it's certainly never been used in anything in the Prince2 guides. What it is, it's a word that's just evolved in our industry because we had a Gantt chart that was created in software from Microsoft Project around the mid-90s, late 90s. Gantt himself created the bar chart concept some, 40, 50 years before that. And when people look at those bars, they assume it's like a waterfall. So, but if you look for a definition of waterfall, it's never been really documented until recent times. And it certainly wasn't documented in the core versions of Prince or the PMI's book either. But for the sake of this presentation, we all know what waterfall is. What we do with waterfall is we do this planning up front, we fix the scope, and then what we try to do is we estimate the time and the effort or the cost. And then what we start to do is we start to level or smooth resources to fit within the cost, and then we look at is the cost okay? It's not okay, we go back to the beginning. Is there another way of delivering it? If there isn't, we look at the scope, we trim the scope back, but at some point we fix the scope and then we start to deliver to milestones. The other way of delivering a project is that iterative way. And as I say, as a noun sense, Agile, that's where we fix the time and the cost, and what we do is we flex the scope. So you can't have both worlds, and there's often a running joke with some of us practitioners where they say you've got the scope, the time and the cost, choose any two of the three and I'll give you that. And I'm hoping this picture here, this diagram here, helps to show that, because this is something I sit down many a time with execs and say, if you want to deliver an Agile, you're first of all got to get out of your waterfall way of thinking, your waterfall world. Your waterfall world is usually when you speak to your finance people, they'll say, what do I get, by when, and how much is it going to cost me? And that's your waterfall world. And then you'll say, waterfall doesn't work because we're always late on our milestones, so we're now going to deliver it with Agile. So I'll say, we're fine to do that, but you've got to be prepared that something's got to give, and it's normally the scope that we flex because we're delivering in an iterative way. So this is why you look at a lot of projects, can they all be delivered Agile? Well, the first question I often ask a lot of execs or people I'm coaching in this world, and this goes to the framework which I'll cover off at the end of this presentation, is if your outcome is predictive, if you are saying that I need to build a skyscraper and I know what that skyscraper looks like, if I'm building a bridge over a river and I know what that bridge looks like, if I know that I'm going to do data migration and I know that data, 100% of it needs to be migrated, there's no halfway or there's no part way of getting there. If I know that I have to train up every single person in my organization before I go live with something, does Agile work the best way? Could I use a Scrum approach? Certainly I can do 2-3 week sprints and do stand-ups every day, but that's not Agile. That's just an iterative way of delivering. What I'm getting at here is, are you looking at your mindset of behaviors and thinking, I'm happy to start to go down a path and change the scope of whatever we're delivering periodically based on facts and evidence and customer and user feedback? So if you're doing a data migration, why would you deliver it with Agile? What is wrong with Waterfall? The challenge we often find in the Waterfall world is that often, because we're estimating the time and the cost, those estimates are based on assumptions. Those assumptions can be wrong. So people automatically think you've failed because you can't shift the scope of the thing. But yet with an Agile world, what we tend to do is we tend to fix the time and the cost and we shift the scope. But the same thing does happen eventually where people go, and I've had a few conversations with C-level execs on this, and one CEO up in Queensland where they've said, don't use the A word in front of me, the Agile world. It didn't deliver us what we wanted. And again, it goes to show the mindset of a lot of people is that sometimes they've got a fixed view of the world of what they want delivering. And when they run out on time and cost and they say, yes, we've delivered everything now within this 12 months and we've done all our sprints and there you go. And they go, no, it's fallen well short of what I expected. So I think these are some of the conversations before you enter into, do I deliver with Agile? Do I deliver with scaled Agile? Do I deliver with Waterfall? That we need to be having in today's world, especially when we're outside a lot of the harder industries, which involve construction, where we're in more the technology and business transformation and digital transformation industries. These are conversations we should be having up front and foremost. And it might be where certain parts of it you go, you know what, these bits are better delivered in an Agile way, but this other bit here, that bit's better delivered in a more of a standard Waterfall way. So this goes on to then some of the research I've been doing with scaling Agile. So what are some of the challenges with scaling it then? So because Agile was often built around small teams, it was 2001, it was just after the dawn of the internet. The internet was coming through in the late 90s. It was created in the mid 90s. Businesses wanted websites, businesses wanted to transact online, and then you started to get the smart phones coming through around 2007 with the first iPhone. Before that there was more smartphones that came out in 2006, and businesses wanted to start to do that. So Agile was created around small teams. So then if you've got a small team building some sort of website interface, or even if you look more modern like an app, small teams work. But then all of a sudden you have many small teams that are delivering in an Agile way, but really it's just one big team, because you've got to have those small teams speaking to each other. So if Agile was founded around small teams, then surely all you've done is you've took one big team and broken it into many small teams. It's still a big team. And many big teams, if you speak to a lot of people who've managed big organizations, many teams, if they've had 200-300 line reports under them, they need that command and control. Yet at the core of the Agile Manifesto, it says, at the Scrum guide at least, it talks about the teams being self-managing and empowered to make decisions. So if you've got 20 teams working in an Agile way, and then you're saying to those 20 teams, yep, you're empowered to make decisions, you've all got a product owner, go make those decisions. For me, the way I picture that, it's like having 20 racehorses going around the Melbourne Cup and trying to keep them in a straight line, delivering in the same direction at the same time, which is not what I get. I get teams running off in all different directions. So how do you link them back up? So again, is that Agile? Are we really pushing Agile down onto those teams? Are we really then walking into a Waterfall delivery model that's iterating at the top level, but not really empowering the teams to solution at the bottom level, especially if we've got many teams? The other thing as well, which you've got to look at, is when you look at scaling Agile, resourcing models, they're not flexible when you scale. People are inherently not flexible. If I said to somebody, you're in this team for this sprint or this 6 weeks, and I want you to move across to that team in 4 weeks' time, and then you're going to be in that team for 6 weeks, people don't like change. They don't like moving around from one team to another. And then added to that, you're often partnering with a lot of people and contractors and other organizations, and you've got contractual agreements in place. So they're not flexible. It's sometimes difficult to get visibility of all the changes going on at any one time. Dependency tracking can be a nightmare. And then added to that, then sometimes you've got the legacy technology. I often share with a lot of people that on one of the programs I led, we had a 40-year-old system that was 60-year-old technology. Testing was in series, it was monolithic, and it had witness data protection information in that system. Yet we were having a conversation about trying to put in 2-week, 3-week sprints. And as soon as you found a defect in the testing cycle, you were straight back to the beginning. So if you found a defect on day 8 of that sprint, you were back to the very beginning of that testing cycle. You couldn't finish it. So the teams really couldn't deliver in an agile way, and certainly not with all the sensitive information that was in that database at the back end. But yet the front end stuff, the apps, we could do in an iterative way. So there's a lot of challenges when you're scaling agile, and it's great that people go on the training courses and people learn about it. But it's like the usual thing. It's like you take the textbook, you take the book, you've got to then contextualize it within your organization. And this is where I often coach about what are the 5 main constraints to delivering an agile way or a scaled agile way. Well, you've got your funding.
Wow.
Yeah.
We have some questions coming in the Q&A. Do you want me to read it in the middle, or you prefer to have it at the end?
Yeah, well, let's go from at the end because they might be repeated questions, and then
Okay.
yeah, that'd be good. Thanks, Mira. Yeah. So when I talk about then some of the constraints to delivering in an agile way, remember constraints can be overcome. They're not blockers. They're just constraints. We'll work around them and work with them. But if you've got a funding cycle and you're delivering in that agile way, and often businesses will say, if I give you this money, the CFO, so they'll give you this money, what are you going to deliver by when? That's one of the challenges we need to face into, one of the constraints. Then you look at, in some industries, you've got policy, legislation, all these regulations and standards and stuff like that. Sometimes changing an element of the law can take, months, if not years in some circumstances. So you look at the earlier days of Uber purposely went out there and broke some of the local bylaws to make sure they could get the product out and the digital transformation out of the door. Because they couldn't wait for those laws to change, they tried to be a disruptor, but not a lot of industries can do that. Then you've got the customer-centric view. Sometimes you can deliver the best solution in the world, it's just that your customers are not ready for it. If you look at the research into what they call unicorns, the billion-dollar organizations that are getting IPO that are put on the stock market, and you look at the research from Stanford about how those billion-dollar organizations got there, one of the core and key themes that came through all of them is that they hit the market at the right time when the users were ready for it. One of the common things we look at there is things like MySpace. For those who remember MySpace, didn't really do much, but Facebook came on some 2 or 3 years later, hit the market at the right time when people were ready for it. So that's a macro example, but your customers are sometimes just not ready for it. And I know from my days in the banking industry, we knew that when they were launching things like banking online, that there would be a big resistance to it and people wouldn't feel secure. If you go back beyond that, people wouldn't buy online because they didn't trust putting credit cards online. A lot of businesses folded because they invested a lot of money into that, but the customers weren't ready for that. So you've got to understand, you want to push the customers, but also sometimes your customers are just not ready for what you're doing or how you're doing it. Then your technology, you've got a lot of legacy constraints with some organizations with your technology that, as I used the example before, it doesn't help you with an agile iterative delivery method. And then finally, sometimes you've got your business. If you want to go to a purist DevOps model where you're pinging into production 2 or 3 times a week, how do the people in your contact centers keep abreast of all the changes that are going on? How do your customers keep abreast of all the changes that are going on? So you look at the research that's come through from things like Cambridge Analytica with Facebook. One of the reasons why that got through is because the exec at the top, they openly admitted this now, said there were so many things going into production so often, they couldn't keep across of absolutely everything. So can the business absorb that level of change going through small and often? Or should we be looking to package it up and releasing it periodically? Again, these are all questions you should be asking yourself if you want to be scaling agile or going with an agile model or a DevOps model. But a lot of times some people just make the decision to go with it and don't really understand their environment and the ecosystem they're going to be operating within. And as a result of that, they come unstuck at times. And this is points where I've been invited in and said, why is it not working, or how can we make it better? And it's usually fallen into one of these 5 areas. There's others as well around training the teams and getting the mindset changes in there, but that's part and parcel of implementing Agile, just like it would be if you was implementing project management to an organization for the first time. But often it's falling into one of these 5 areas. So the other thing as well, when we deliver with Agile, what we tend to do is think of technology and systems and solutions being like a cake, and there's various different layers of that cake. And what we sometimes often get coached on is that we want to use a story that is like a slice of that cake that goes all the way through. And the challenge with that sometimes is that if you are a single project team, it's easy sometimes to go as a slice all the way through to the back end. But then what you sometimes find is if you've got many different Agile teams, what you end up with is you end up with all these different teams trying to touch the back end database or operating system at the same time, which is why we have these release teams. So in some organizations where they've got very simple modern technologies, they've probably got stuff in place that allows them to do that. But if you're one of those organizations that's got a 40-year-old legacy system, that's got a specialist team that's touching the back-end infrastructure, how do you get them to face off to many different sprint teams? So I don't want to be all doom and gloom, but that is some of the challenges when people say, we're just going to deliver with Agile now, and forget project management, forget Waterfall, we're just going to go down the Agile route. Or I've just come off a scaled Agile course and we're just going to set up a release team. And as one of the things they do in scaled Agile, and I've done the scaled Agile program consultant, is that they'll say just start, and there's an actual roadmap to starting, and you start you just start and you train everybody up, and then you start to do those 1% improvements every time, and eventually you'll get better and better at this. But I've often found you need to take a step back and understand your whole environment that you're operating within, understand your customers, understand your business, understand your technologies, understand your decision makers and your stakeholders. And that's the ecosystem. And once you understand that, then you can start to then develop what might be your digital transformation framework that will help your organization to go forward and say, these bits here we might do Agile on, and these bits here we might have a more standard Waterfall style approach. So coming into why does digital transformation or Agile need a digital transformation framework? So as part of writing the standard, we've had offline several different debates over what is digital. And it's interesting with the COVID stuff that's been happening recently. I've been sitting as a spectator just watching LinkedIn, munching my popcorn and enjoying these little sound bites and opinion pieces that people are sharing, which are just in my view, in some areas, just completely wrong. I remember hearing one recruiter saying, now we're doing more digital transformation with organizations. We're going to need more digital people going forward. Just look how COVID's changed the world. We now do meetings via Zoom, and that is at the forefront of our digital transformation. Or implementing Zoom or GovTeams or Teams is part of, digital transformation. It is not true. These are just tools that help us to do the job. If that's the case, then when we first got Windows 95, was that digital transformation because it helped us to write up documents better and get away with the typing pool? It's not. So when you look at digital is about how humans interact with those various technologies to receive or maintain a product or service. So you think about your driving license. You used to fill a form in. Now you can apply for your driving license online. You think about how you used to buy in the past. You used to go into a shop or a store. Now you can go online. But it's not just one technology, it's various technologies. It's an app, it's the web. Even now we're starting to see that you can do audio style ordering, through various things like Siri and Alexa and the likes. So digital covers many technologies, mobile, desktop, audio interfaces, mesh of apps. It's got UX, data analytics. It's got, artificial intelligence, AI algorithms, platforms, cognitive computing. It's got all those things intertwined. It's multiple technologies, but it's how the human interacts with those various technologies to receive that product or service. So if that's digital, what's digital transformation? So that's the continuous creation and modification of these manual and transactional processes towards an automated one. Sometimes it's difficult to get the end-to-end process delivered straight away. If we look back on our banking journey and roughly around the mid-2000s, probably early 2000s, when banking started going online, we could only check our balance online at first. And then we started to be able to transfer money from one of our own accounts to one of our other accounts, like from your current account or your check account to your savings account. And then you started to be able to pay bills, and then you started to be able to apply for mortgages and credit cards, and eventually it iterated in the way it went. So it was a continuous delivery of those transactional outcomes to the customer. And to do that, we needed to understand how the user would interface and the customer would interface with those various technologies. And even now what we're looking at is, where you can, omnichannel started coming through about 2010. It's starting to be used a lot more now. Omnichannel is various channels you can apply and do the same transaction, a mobile phone, through Alexa, or on your desktop. But then can you start in one, pause it, come out, and then go into the next channel and then carry on the transaction? So we're starting to see a lot of that now coming through. And then we're even starting to see predictive, where using AI and data and analytics, we're starting to get it where it's now a push. So rather than you pushing your information in there, the organization is pushing your data and information to you and suggesting stuff and predicting stuff that you need. So what is a digital transformation framework? So I've already covered off what Agile is and what Scrum is. I won't go over that again. It's that transformation framework that encompasses all the aspects of the delivery ecosystem coming together. You've looked at the 5 constraints, you've probably even identified others, and it aims to put in something that continually improves and changes. Go back to the core of the 17 authors of the Agile Manifesto and say, it's about delivering the best outcome as best we can for the customer. So that means you've got to constantly improve and iterate, and each organization you go in and each digital transformation you work on will be slightly different. So you need to do different things. And as a quick brief run through, these are some of the things you should be considering when you're pulling together your digital transformation framework, which encompasses Agile, Waterfall, all your delivery practices. And what you've got there is you understand the CX is the customer experience dashboard. What are your metrics? What are you measuring about how your customer is performing by using your solution? How are you getting funded? What's your strategy of your different products and services going forward? Have you got your design set up where you're testing with real users? That's the human-centric design bit. And then you've got your architecture of all your different modular systems and your legacy systems. Then you've got your cyber that needs to wrap around it to protect it all. You understand your testing strategy, not just testing technology, but how are you going to test it with the users to make sure it does what you want it to do? How do you develop those organizational capabilities to say, we have kids in contact centers who used to put transactions through, and now what we need is we need people in contact centers who now coach and educate people on the phone on how to do a digital transformation. That's a change in an organizational capability, going from putting transactions through to supporting the customer. How do you transition from the old world to the new? How do you modify those behaviors in the customer so they start to use your new digital solution? And then how do you drive up that digital adoption rate? None of that is covered in Agile or Scrum. And that's why your framework needs to encompass all these different aspects. So as we're finishing off here, so this is a digital transformation framework I threw together. It's the top slide, the top page, the top diagram. It had a lot of stuff underneath it. But what it did show to us is that we had a digital strategy at the top. We had a strategy train or a lane. We would map out what the organizational capabilities are in a capability framework. We would break that down into different features and different things, should we say, and non-functional stuff that needed to be changed in the organization. We had the volumetrics that supported that. That's the amount of transactions so the volumes of transactions per, as a volume. So if we did say, for example, rego renewals, driving license renewals, or was it just change of address? What were the highest volume? Were they simple, medium, complex? And we brought them down. That was the whole strategy bit, and the roadmap came out of that. Then we had underpinning that, then what the release plan would look like. So then we understood then what was the stuff we did as part of service design, that human-centric design. We would do an alpha prototype, test it with the users, see what they thought, show them a real front-end experience. And if they were happy with that, after we'd made a few tweaks, we'd drop it down into a beta, which was pre-production. Then we'd trial it with a sample size, that's a public beta. And then once we were happy that the users were getting out of it what they wanted, then we would look to integrate and change the organization. So as you can see, there's like 3 or 4 lanes there. There's not one release train. And instead of jumping the team from one piece to another and putting it in a linear fashion, we set up the teams around that. So what next? I'm going to go up to questions in a moment, but if you used to go away, if you're going to go on your Agile journey or your Scrum journey, don't be afraid to ask, is Waterfall more appropriate? And don't be afraid to ask why we're using Agile, conversely, on the flip side. Can you develop your own end-to-end digital transformation framework? Do you understand your constraints? And the one thing that I often talk away with this stuff is people said, how long does it take to get scaled agile, you know, the waterfall practice up and running? For me, it took months. I think between 6 and 9 months till you get to a point where you're looking back and going, yeah, this is working really nice now. You know, in a world that's already been operating with some agile, you might get some good wins within 3 to 4 months, but realistically, yeah, it's about reorganizing teams, getting them to work differently, getting the exec to think differently, and then getting people to understand that this bit we're going to deliver this way and this bit we're going to deliver that way, and this is how it's all going to knit together under a digital transformation framework. So Amira, that wraps it up. Do you want to start going through some of the questions?
Yeah, you have a big list. Are you ready? Do you want to have a sip of tea or something?
Go for it. So I'll stop sharing my screen now so people can see the ugly face I have. Go on, start reading the questions while I start to.
Okay, one of the, yeah, cool. We have your. I start from the bottom of the list. So there is a question about the governance. So one person asked, where does governance sit in the digital transformation framework? And also, what about agile governance? Do you think it exists? How should it apply?
Yeah, so I'll ask the second one first. Agile governance is a myth. It does not exist because agile is a set of mindset and behaviors. So how can you govern a mindset or their behaviors? What you can do is coach and educate people on the best behaviors to display that aligns with the agile mindset. But how do you govern that? And should you? Because there's certain points when the world acts and thinks waterfall, and why would you govern that mindset to start off with? You should be coaching, educating, and talking to people about, you know, the way you've just displayed that behavior there. I mean, there's obviously better ways of phrasing it. I'm doing it for the shortness here, but is that displaying an agile mindset? So when we talk about certain things like, let me just try and think of one. Accept that we're going to change the plan or we're following the wrong plan. Yeah. So, you know, if people say, no, we're still going. Yeah. And you know there's some big issues. An agile mindset would say, well, let's accept that, you know, rather than following the wrong plan, we're going to look at changing the plan. Not saying it's the right thing to do, but that's a mindset. It's not a governance thing. Now, when you start talking about governance and decision making, my views are that in some organizations, what we've tended to do is we've tended to create these pseudo detailed hierarchies of governance, and they are so deep and so complex. And when you go around and talk to people and interview them and try to understand what is going on, you start to realize there's probably 2 or 3 decision makers, not a trail of 15, 20 or more. So my challenge back to you would be, when you talk about agile governance or governance in an agile world, is have you flattened the decision-making process? Have you got it as flat as you can, where you've got a line to those 3 or 4 decision makers? And if you have, then that's governing it. If you think about what governance is just basic decision making, and for decision making, you need one of 2 things. You need information, and you need some options going forwards. If you have those 2 things, you can make a decision. So have you got the right people in the room, and are you giving them the right information and then giving them some options going forwards? So we need to try and strip out as much as we can as far as these deep and big governance structures. They are still required. I've often thought, if you go back to the digital transformation framework and you say you've got that CX dashboard at the top, they are hard to get up and running. But once you've got them up and running, by God, it takes all the emotion out of decision making, because all of a sudden you start looking at a list of things you could do, and you start looking at your customer experience dashboard and saying, you know, item number 3 here that you want to put as a top priority, where does it add value to our customer? And then all of a sudden they'll go, well, it doesn't. And you'll say number 1 on this list here, not number 3, will actually reduce the time of our customers filling in a transaction from 11 minutes down to 10 minutes. And you do that, you know, 10,000 times a month, and you think about how much time you're saving for the customer. But then conversely, then every minute we get extra phone calls coming into our contact center. So you start having a facts and evidence conversation about the way forward, not an emotional one. So, but you've got to do those things. You've got to try to flatten your structure, identify those core decision makers, and get that information to them with some options. And that way you'll be quicker. I think the other thing that also helps with Agile, and I don't want to put it down on Agile, because I think there's often 3 people. There's anti-Agile on one hand. You know, it's almost like the political spectrum of Agile here. There's probably a blog on this somewhere. You've got the other half, which is the Agile evangelists, who thou shalt follow the Agile Manifesto and the Scrum Guide, and if you bend away from it, they'll burn you. Yeah. And then you've got in the middle, you've got the Agile Pragmatists. And I like to think of myself as being a pragmatist here, where I understand the flaws in the purist Agile world. And this is why I talk about, you know, there's nothing bad with Waterfall. If you're going to go predictive and build a skyscraper, a bridge, do a data migration, train up 300 people in your organization, why would you apply Agile to that? You know, still do 2-week sprints and your planning, you could do all that, but why would you do that? Why would you want to iterate the solution? You know, just imagine training up 200 people in a call center over a month. In the first week, we're going to train up 50. Oh, we've learned from that, so we're going to train up the second lot of 50 in a different way. It doesn't work like that. Yeah, so you're being predictive. So I think there's an element of that, and I think you've got to try to then look at the governance bit. Is you can have it flatter, but one of the beautiful things about Agile, so going back to it, is that by showing the thing, it's better than a status update. I think the amount of times we write these reports and they're 20 pages long, 10 pages long, here's our risks, here's our issues, here's our plan, here's our financials. You know, that's important, and I get that. I've been a PMO for long enough and done that. But as soon as you start to demonstrate the thing and show it at the end of every sprint, then people go, I get it, and now I understand what probably needs to happen next. And you can identify the problems and say, this is the problem we've experienced here. These customers keep dropping out at this point here. Right, I've given you the information. Here's some options. What do you want us to do about it? Do you want us to do, you know, push the sprint plan back? Change the plan? That's an Agile mindset. So that's
the thing. So do you think that Agile often used as an excuse for proper preparation and planning then?
Yes. I think Agile, yeah. So this is one thing I'd love people to take away on this call. The person who's raised that question, it'd be great if we could have a longer conversation with you at some point, but that is the crux of where this industry have got to, which is in a very bad and dark place. We are treating Agile as a noun. So automatically people are saying, I'm going to deliver this project with Agile. They haven't said, I'm going to apply an Agile mindset and behaviors to the way we deliver this project. Read the Agile Manifesto, read the second page of the principles. It mentions project twice. It also mentions in the values at the beginning about changing a plan because you've got a plan. It doesn't. I've had this argument. Oh God, I've had this argument with somebody some years ago. Scrum Master, just come off a Scrum course, well respected by some of his elderly peers. He says, "I can do Agile for you." And I said, I went in there, and I said to him, like, "Where's the roadmap then?" You know, and he says, "We don't have a roadmap." I said, "That's okay. I can help us pull one together." He went, "No, you're not doing a roadmap, Ralph." I went, "What do you mean we're not doing a roadmap?" He went, "We're doing Agile." Yeah, and he says, "Well, you have a plan?" He went, no. He says, "Look," he says, "read the Agile Manifesto." It says here, you know, the plan's going to change. So you accept you're going to change it. You're going to change it every 2 weeks. So that's why we don't have a roadmap. I went, "No, if you read it again, it says rather than following the wrong plan, you accept the plan's going to change. It implies there is a plan. So where's our plan? And he goes, no, it says it. No, I went, no. And this was one of those evangelists, you know, and he was then, you know, shut up, Ralph, slapping me down. And I'm going, no. And then if you watch the YouTube panel interviews with people like Dave Thomas and some of the other Agile authors, they often talk about that Scrum was probably one of the worst things that was created with Agile. Yeah, he even talks about, he says I'd steer well away from Scrum if I was talking about Agile, because he's got the mindset. And that goes back to it about people are saying, we don't do other project methodologies, we're going to deliver this with Agile. No, you're going to apply an Agile mindset to the way you deliver the project. That in itself, the way I've rephrased the question the other way around, shows how I've got the right way of thinking, and that other person, not that person who's raised the question, the other person I'm working with, has got the wrong mindset.
So the other question is, how do you recommend Agile be used in regulatory compliance environments when the scope is fixed and time is fixed? Do you just increase costs?
That is interesting, because I've seen a few people say we're going to deliver Agile, we're going to deliver policy, ways of thinking and policy with Agile now. And I've downloaded and looked at some of the articles and some of the information that people have come up with that. And for me personally, it's not Agile. What they've done is they've applied Scrum as an approach to Agile, to policy development. And they are spot on right, because you've got a fixed outcome. You can't deliver part of a bill, part of a law. So what you need to be able to do is say, going back to those 3 triangles, hey, look, we're happy to keep delivering in a Scrum method, which is we're going to do 2-3 week sprints and keep iterating the plan as we go, as we learn. And that's a good thing to do, especially with policy development, because there's a lot of consultation and you're receiving a lot of new information, and that changes your way of thinking. And if you think about that, changing the way of thinking to get the best outcome for the customer, that's an Agile mindset. That's good. But you can't deliver 50 pages of a 70-page bill that's got to go up to Parliament to be signed into law. You can't deliver, and I've worked on vehicle standards recently, and I know you can't go part way with vehicle standards. You know, you can't say, yeah, we looked at the brakes and the tyres, they're all right, but the lights, oh, we didn't cover those off. Yeah. So, but I think what you need to do then is work with your peers and your exec and say, but you do realise that as we learn new things, we will need to be given extra time and cost. But we are applying the Agile mindset and behaviours, as in, rather than writing up the policy and legislation on day one with what we think it should be, we've gone out, tested it with our customers. I know that, you know, various different industry forums and groups. We've sought that feedback and we're iterating as we go. The challenge with that is that can almost be a never-ending process, and that's where you need to make sure you're very clear at some point with decision makers, where you draw a line and go, okay, it's done now, it's done.
Yeah. The other question is, are you saying that wanting visibility of all changes at the same time is not good? Isn't visualization important in Agile or value stream models?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying actually, the more visible and more transparent you make everything, the more trust you build, and the more trust you build, the better it is for the team, for mental health, for decision making. There's too many positives. So I always say that one thing you should come out with this is to, you know, whatever framework you pull together, make things visible, make things transparent. I honestly believe that the sprint review is a fantastic thing. I do think, though, that the sprint review, when you start to scale Agile, can get a bit tricky at times. 2 things. One, because of the volume of work that you want to show. And secondly, because some of the stuff you might want to show to some of the other stakeholders or peers may be misinterpreted or may not be ready to be shared broadly yet. So what I sometimes apply over the top is I say for the teams to do a sprint review, and then what we will do as a program is do a showcase, and that way we can show the whole program and beyond that the peers. And bearing in mind, if you've been doing this in the right way, you've been testing it with real users, have you gone? So even some of the real users have seen this. You can be showing the thing as you go. And I also believe if you record those showcases and you look back, that's a good monitor of progress that you're making.
Yeah, very good. So the other interesting question in the list is, how do you track dependencies across multiple agile teams when there may be interdependent activities that impact overall company objectives?
Great question. And that is one of the areas I think that I have personally struggled with going on many scaled agile projects because of the way that they do the dependencies. I think what they do is they go, what we have is one release train with many different sprint teams. And then for those who've been involved in scaled agile, you then get the wool out and you put the wool everywhere and you look at all these dependencies on the board and you stand back and go, yeah, we've done the dependency mapping now, great. Yeah, but anybody who knows, who's delivered transformations, whether it be in construction or major projects, more dependencies is more risk, it's more problems, and before you know it, all you end up doing is managing those full times. So what I believe is, as part of the digital transformation framework, and this goes back to understanding your 5 constraints as well, is when you create your team structure, you create it in a way where you break those dependencies. You try to come up with a way where the best way of managing dependencies is within the team. As soon as you go, imagine this, if you've got one project and another project, that's like 2 different countries. And to get from one country to the other country, you need a passport, you need to go through immigration and all the checks in place. So what you end up doing is going up through one project manager across and back through. So that's a problem in itself. Then what you find is then within the project, if you've got many teams, they're like counties, and counties don't, or states don't always communicate well to each other either. So if you can come up with the right state structure, the team structure within your project, they'll manage those dependencies. You look at all these problems we've had recently at a macro level with COVID. It's never been internally within New South Wales that there's been challenges of trying to move resources around. The challenges has been when New South Wales needs to go across and work with Queensland, or Victoria needs to come across to New South Wales. So as soon as you get these different team structures in place, teams don't naturally talk to each other. They don't. The teams talk within teams. So coming back to the dependencies, have you got the right team structure in place? And to me, this is where the digital transformation framework is a great way of taking a step back and going, okay, well, maybe what we've got here is we've got the strategy team with a solution architect, enterprise architect, big product owner, coming up with the features and so on, and working with the business and mapping out what those might be. Then we've got the service design team who are developing the front end, and they're testing with users and seeing what that solution might look like or that transaction might look like. Then we've got like a build team that's then iterating and turning that into a pre-production, testing it with real users. You break into dependencies, but you also tend to keep the makeup of the teams pretty static or more static, which means you get higher productivity. But you still got multidisciplinary teams. You just got a different makeup and balance of the types of skills you've got. So that's how I try to manage dependencies. Then you get less dependencies from one team to the other.
Yes. So in that case, how do you overcome the resource inflexibility then?
So that's, again, I've just answered it there. If you create the right team structure, what you're doing is, I'll give an example. On one engagement I was on, we said, right, we'll have a team that tests an alpha being like just a mock-up prototype with the users. That was more heavily weighted towards service design, BAs, and one developer who would spin up a mock-up prototype, and they would test that with the real users. So that team, and they would do that with one thing. Once they knew that was about right, they'd park it on a shelf, hand it over to the next team, who would then turn that item into something that was pre-production. So that had more developers, more people who would integrate into the back end, less service design, more testers. And then once we got that up and running, we tested it with real users, a real transaction this time. And then we fixed the bugs and the blips and the glitches. It wasn't just a system stuff. It was a user was trying to do this there. We didn't think we were going to try and do that. Yep, let's fix that then. So those teams stayed a bit more static there. And then when we finally said, right, okay, how do we package up a lot of these things? And then what we'll do is we'll hand them over to a business change team. And that's where service transition alliance was done. And people look back on it and they says, well, that's a very waterfall way of delivery. And I said, yeah, and what's the problem with that? They're applying an agile mindset. They're still testing with the customers. They've still got continuous delivery of software, which is one of the primary tests of Agile. They're still adapting to changing the plan. They're still working on customers over contract negotiation.
Yeah.
They're applying.
So in that case,
yeah.
You were mentioning about changing the way of working, right? So moving to Teams Zoom for meeting is digital transformation, changing how people interact and where they need to be physically. They are actually challenging it.
Okay, so my argument would be, what transaction or service are you receiving by using Zoom?
Meeting.
What multiple technologies are you using with Zoom?
No, multiple.
There you go. It's how it all comes together. There's some transactions that you do. If you think about today, when you deal with an organization, can you do with your bank 100% of all transactions online on your mobile app or through an audio device?
Yeah.
The answer is no, you can't. So that whole ecosystem has to come together. That's the digital transformation. It's how does the contact center, the online support, deal with the stuff that falls out of the automated processes and transactions. If you was working at the moment, let's take Service New South Wales, a great example. There'll be certain things. Why do you think they have service centres that you can walk into? Because there's certain things you still can't do online, or certain people who might have be susceptible, a bit more vulnerable in society, that need to do certain things face to face. But what they're doing is they're driving, they're going on they're probably the best example here in Australia of an organisation that's driving the digital strategy, digital transformation strategy, and they've got a transition plan, and they're trying to get the adoption rate up to the point where if you Google Service New South Wales, they've now realised that not many people are using the service centres in certain areas, so they've now put like an office or a service centre rather into a van, and that van drives around certain smaller towns where the transactions are lower. That's all part of their ecosystem.
Yeah, we already have a client who works in digitalizing the whole reporting and data gathering process. But how the people are reading the report is they print it out. So they just need a PDF to print it out. They will print it. They actually physically, they print it out in a paper. So yeah, this is the environment and ecosystem, so we need to be aware of that. So the other question is, how do you measure progress, test the health of the framework?
That's a good question, because I think the primary focus is going back to that CX dashboard. That's the primary focus. Are you delivering value to your customers, and understanding what are your customers, who are they, and how do you measure performance? So some organizations it can be more, let's look at retailers as a good example. You look at a lot of your traditional retailers that started off with stores and a high street. They are now measuring how many of these transactions can be done online. Yeah. Then they'll look at the size of the baskets that are being done online. That's another metric. Then you look at how quickly those things get delivered to your front door. That's another metric. You look at how fast they get the transaction done online. So you look at Amazon, for those people who use Amazon. I've been quite fortunate living in the UK and working out in the US, and what you've got there is where Amazon do the one click, and I think they brought it in here now in Australia, where as soon as you see the item on the screen, you can just press one click buy straight away. You don't have to go all the way through and say, this is the address I want it to be delivered to, I've accepted these are the charges. Yeah, they've got the one click. So what they're doing is they're shortening the time it takes for you to buy online. Yeah. So
or defining those metrics for each component in the framework, I think. So because at the end of the day, it is a framework, as you said, it's not a methodology.
Exactly.
And it's like creating those KPIs attached to each component of the framework that it's measurable and it's applicable to your model. It's the main way of I'm not calling it as a measure progress. I actually call it as a measure the value add.
That's it.
Yeah, because there's cybersecurity. That's not a progress. It's actually you're looking at how much value you're adding within that component of the framework, which is which is good because it's actually showing the unknown parameters on the layers.
I think the interesting thing is, which that a lot of people will say, is how many milestones have we had success in hitting? Think about that.
But that is going back to the plan, right? So,
yeah, well, and this
or
is
the commitment.
This is where I disagree with this metric, and I often share a story with some people where, and you know, back in my early days in banking, about early 2000s, one of the objectives when I took over the portfolio office there, and I had a team of 20 project managers under me, and my job was to develop capability, was that they said less than 5% of the projects will be in red. And I was like, okay. And they had metrics for defining red. It went over budget by a certain amount, or it didn't hit major milestones. And I said, well, it's dead easy for me to hit that. And they went, why is that? I went, then I'm just going to change my estimating philosophy. And I'm just going to start to estimate further out and estimate they're going to cost more. And they went, oh, never thought of it that way. So I said, so it's not really an indication of developing organizational capability in delivering projects. And I says, and also, is it delivering projects or is it managing projects? Because it's called project management. So I think when I go back to the digital transformation framework, we've got to move away from this milestones. And if you go back to one of the agile you know, principles, it talks about the continuous delivery of software. So if you are starting to push software out more regular and more often, and it's more right, and you've closed that feedback loop between the developers and the testers, so you're getting less test defects, between the customer can do more transactions, between, you know, you're closing these loops all the time. That is a good measure of progress, and that you're improving. And you've also got to bear in mind, there's external influences and factors that are going to force you to change your framework. New leadership team comes in, mergers, new products, something wanted, you know, work with a different provider, a different vendor, and that's why it's a framework. It doesn't stay still.
Yeah, exactly. So it just really depends on how you are tailoring it in your environment. So at the last question for the last minute, so if you were assessing the health of an agile delivery environment, what would be the primary things you would like at first?
Oh, the primary things at first. So repeat that question. Is it about if we was to go in and start?
If you were assessing the health of an agile delivery environment,
yeah,
what would be the primary things you would look at first?
Assessing the health. So yeah, that's really thought-provoking question, because
it really depends on the environment and the expectations, I think.
I'm thinking about the times I've actually been fortunate enough to go into the organization and do project reviews, not necessarily agile reviews, or which agile is part of it. And I've had conversations with people and trying to understand, are they, when they're having a conversation with me, the words and the phrases and they're explaining their world, are they displaying an agile mindset and behaviors? And I've often got into a conversation with them about, they're saying, well, we're delivering with agile. And I've gone, no, you're actually delivering with Scrum. What I'm looking for is that you're displaying to me that you, as an agile coach or a leader, is showing me that you've got the right mindset and behaviors to deliver with agile. So I think that's the first point of assessing the health. It's about the people, and that includes the exec and the leadership, because there's too often I've gone in and they've said, yeah, we're delivering agile, and I've insisted I want this app pre-production ready by the 1st of October, and it must be ready to be pushed out middle of October. And I've gone, right, okay, and what happens if we test with users, because you've said we're delivering with agile, and we need to get it right with the users, and we find out that the users have found ways to break it. Are you comfortable with pushing that deadline of the 1st of October back? And they go, no, because I promised to my CEO that we'd do it on this day. So you've decided you want an inferior product pushing out to market. So again, that's you know, agile health. You know, you're having these conversations with people and understanding, are they applying that mindset? I think the other part to that is then the planning bit. You know, are we accepting that we're planning in advance, but we're changing the plan as we go based on what we're learning? I think that's another core part.
So I just I'm enjoying the conversation, but like we are very tight in time. Thank you very much, Ralph, for everything, for sharing your knowledge and the outcomes. It was a great. And then I would like to invite everyone to put in the comments in the meetup to let us know how you feel and how you think about this session. So last bit of each session in the PMO meetup is about the book. So we are. I would like to introduce why digital transformations fail: the surprising disciplines of how to take off and stay ahead. From Tony Saldana. I think Ralph, you're reading this book as you mentioned. So it's a very highly recommended book for people who are dealing and involved. They are involved in the digital transformation program. So thank you very much, everybody. I could see that we had constant more than 20 people online. So I'm sure that you guys enjoyed it. In terms of the polling, so it seems that most of the people are really agree with the mix of both. So I will keep you posted. So stay there. And check your meetup. We will have more wonderful session in following months. So if you are not hearing from me, there is something happening to me. Have a good night and enjoy your rest of the week. Thank you so much, Ralph. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.